So, again, good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. I am Pallavi Ade, the co-founder of Asian Pathfinders, along with Shreyas Deshmukh, who is the co-host here, along with me. So, we started in 2020. Uh, and I'll just give you a brief about us before we move on to today's book discussion, which is with sorry, with Shakti Sinha sir on his new book, which is Vajpayee, The Years That Changed India. I already have got my hand on it. If you haven't, do check out your nearest bookstore or Amazon or Flipkarts. So, and I'm sure sir will give us a better idea about his book. About us, like I said, we started in 2020. We are a knowledge sharing platform. We aim to bring scholars, practitioners, academics together to further the discussion on public policy and different issues that impact our world. We do this through our Fireside Chats, which is what we are doing today, which is held every Saturday. And we also hold these panel discussions that we call dialogues, where we get experts from various regions, like we did on this Thursday, which was on the refugee crisis. So we do that every alternate Thursdays. You can check our social media pages, and we also put our sessions on YouTube because we know time differences. Not everyone can join in. So you can always look up on YouTube if you missed a session. Uh, so about our upcoming sessions. So because it's the start of the year, we are doing kind of looking ahead into 2021. We're looking at two very important relations for India, which is India-Pakistan, which is next week, which will be Dr. Ashok Behuria, who is the senior fellow and coordinator of the South Asia Center at the IDSA. It's a important and a very top think tank in India for the ones who don't know. And we have Professor Shrikant Kondapalli joining us on January 23rd, where he'll be looking at the outlook for India-China relations in 2021. I think a lot of us know what happened in 2020 between the two countries. So I think this is going to be a very important session also. And he's a professor in Chinese studies at the Jawaharlal Nehru University. So you can always keep an eye out for our social media pages. So these are the next two Saturdays. So that's there. And just the basic guidelines. I know we all are professionals, so we don't need this, but just to keep all of us on the same page. We do put our sessions on YouTube, but we do encourage you to put your comments and questions in the chat section. Keep yourself on mute, please, just so that the speakers and the moderator can have the platform to speak without any noise in the background, and also respect intellectual property, and just watch the language that we use during these talks. But really, really, please be encouraging you to be an engaging audience. We've never had that complaint with the audience. They've always been engaging, but we just want to tell you this again. Uh, how do you reach us? Shreyas, we both are on social media. You can find us or look up Asian Pathfinders. Other than I think Instagram, we are mostly on all the platforms. Uh, Not hip enough to be on Instagram, I guess, yet. Uh, Today's discussion, it's the book by Shakti Sinha sir, like I said. And we have Kumar Subham, who is going to be moderating this session. So I'll introduce Kumar before we go ahead. So Kumar is the co-founder of Rashtam School of Public Leadership, and he's also the former director at the Vision India Foundation. He also serves currently as the editorial consultant at Z News. He holds a bachelor's in computer science from IIT Delhi and a master's in public administration. He has previously worked for multiple MNCs to develop tech products on education and health before he switched to the public policy space. His interest areas are government systems, e-governance, and institutional strategies. And for the ones who don't know, Kumar is actually a very familiar face on the public policy platforms in India. So I think he's the right person to moderate this session. So over to you, Kumar.
Thanks a lot, Pallavi, for the generous introduction. Uh, for me, it's a personal pleasure to be interacting with Shakti sir. I have known him for past 5 years now. Firstly, seeing him on multiple platforms, then interacting with him while he was on Nehru Memorial Museum and Library. Having heard him multiple times on the podium, including 5 in Nehru Memorial and 3 times outside Nehru Memorial. Uh, Personally, for me, Shakti Sinha ji represents a good amalgamation of administrative acumen, a good sense of the political economic situation because of being both an observer as an active participant. And he also brings with him years of experience, not just in the administration, but on the political and academic side of things. His work in Nehru Memorial, both in terms of the quality of research, the quality of scholars that came out of it, as well as in transforming the institution from being just another building in the Lutyens area and hosting the planetarium next to it, to becoming a hotbed of intellectual discussions, intellectual conclaves, as well as transforming what it is coming to be in the next few years as the Museum of Prime Ministers. To give what he's currently doing, he is currently the Honorary Director of Atal Bihari Vajpayee Center at Maharaja Sayajirao University. He is currently also very well associated with India Foundation, formerly in the Board of Directors, currently as a fellow. His current book, Vajpayee, is one of the fastest reads that I've had. I finished this in the last 3 days since Pallavi and Shreyansh mentioned to me to do a moderation with Shakti sir on this. The book finishing was partly owed to the need for this session and partly owed to my personal growing up in the Vajpayee era, looking at the Pokhran test, looking at the Kargil war, and also looking at the growth of the political party that Vajpayee very much fueled in the recent years. It's a pleasure welcoming you, sir, on this place, and it's a pleasure moderating you today. Welcome.
Thank you, Kumar. Thank you, Subham, very much for the very, very generous and introduction. Really generous, but I'm glad to be on this platform. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm glad, as you said, that you've gone through the book in detail, and that hopefully we'll be able to flesh out things for the people participating in it. So good morning to everybody, and thank you for inviting me.
Good morning, sir. Before we begin, we would request you to give a brief on the book, on what prompted you firstly to write this book, what prompted you to take the title, which says the years that changed India, in smaller font, and then Vajpayee in the bigger font. And thirdly, there are 6 interesting names in the cover. One name is Vajpayee himself. The second interesting name is the current Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji, and 3 very interesting people on the back. One from the army, one from the academia, and one who is a career bureaucrat in some ways and a person who understands the economics of the nation, Mr. Vijay Kelkar ji. What prompted you to write this book and the choice of these 6 names, including yours?
The first one is easier to say. You know, I've written in the book that Vajpayee is a very understudied person, in the sense that people all have very general ideas about, oh, he was a great orator, he was a unifier, and he was in the middle of the road, took people along, a conciliator. All that is fine. He's also a politician. He came out from the ranks, came from a very poor family. Father was a school teacher, not a very poor family, but yeah, family of limited income, etc. And from there, without any godfathers to reach this, there must be so much more to him. So in this book, and this book is a thick book. It's 350 pages or so. It captures 1.5 years of his prime ministership, the first prime ministership, really effective prime ministership. But I also bring in his background. So, you know, you can't just start a person at the age of 72 or something. You have to bring in some of the background also. So I did that also. More importantly, I thought that a lot of nostalgia for that era, which I hear today, is pure myth. It's pure myth. I remember those days. They were difficult days. They were not easy days. The government was under constant attack every day. Either the churning within the government, different parties pulling in different directions, different individuals pulling in different directions. It was not a cohesive government. The opposition made sure that the government could not settle down for a day. Large amounts of the media were very hostile. And Mr. Vajpayee was called everything. He was called communal. He was called fascist. He was called saffronizing the system. So he was accused of many things, you know. So I thought one should put that in perspective, because, you know, as a student of history, which I am, you, with time, allows you a bit of distance, allows you the ability to screen facts, you know, and remove the irrelevant things and try to portray a picture. Of course, it is said that every generation should write its own history, because times change, thoughts change, our, what should I say, our perceptions change, our experience changes. So all that is necessary to do that. So I was going to do that. And the book has basically 5 larger themes, which is why the title is The Years That Changed India. Why this was so different. See, India changes. All of us change every day. But to me, these were 5 seminal changes which has affected what India is today. It has affected the way we look at the world. Critically, it has affected the way the world looks at India. So I think there were very seminal changes, these 5 changes. And I can elaborate when. Now coming to why the 6 names. Well, Vajpayee, obviously, I'm writing a book on Vajpayee. The Honorable Prime Minister was gracious enough to let us use a quotation of his. Because we thought that would bring out that quotation, very succinct quotation, brings out Vajpayee very strongly. And then we requested a number of people to write some endorsements. So we asked 5 or 6 people, 3 which came first went on the cover. The book was going to the press already. And 2, I think, were put inside. I feel bad for those 2, but yeah, the publisher said we can only carry so much of space, So space limitations, otherwise instead of 6 names that you mentioned, there have been 8 names or something, That is, because these are people I thought would understand different aspects of the Vajpayee prime ministership, and therefore I thought of taking their endorsement. General Malik was very much chief of the army staff, the Kargil war. Vijay Kelkar was the finance secretary, did a very good budget. The 99 budget was there. And since I know Sumit Ganguly again is a very seasoned academic, strategic thinker, understands India well. He and I disagree on many things, but that's okay. That's okay. Debate is a very strength of academia, and we should encourage that. Which is why the names are there. Instead, Raja Mohan is there, and Manvendra Singh is there.
Okay. The format of the session requires me to ask you if you can share a quick brief of the book. I know you have shared this on multiple platforms. I heard all of your talks on YouTube. There are some key definitive moments that various people have asked you. I do not want to repeat them on this talk again, but yet they would very much interest all the audience over here. So if you could quickly give us a gist of the book in a couple of minutes, in 10, 15 minutes, that will really help.
I'll do it in 8 to 10 minutes, not longer. As I said, it's about 5 themes basically. The first theme, of course, is that Vajpayee was the first genuine non-Congress Prime Minister of India. We had non-Congress governments before, the Janata government of 77, the Janata Dal government, then the Chandrasekhar government. But Morarji Desai was a lifelong congressman. Chandrasekhar was a lifelong congressman. VP Singh was lifelong Congress. So while they were technically non-Congress governments, the Prime Ministers themselves had been congressmen all their lives. Vajpayee was never in the Congress. And that coalition that he represented, which he led, the largest single component was the Bharatiya Janata Party, whose predecessor was the Bharatiya Janata Sangh. They were seen as outliers of the Indian political system, etc. And now they had moved to pole position. So, and since then, since 1996, every government formed at the center has been either BJP led or formed to prevent the BJP coming into government. So the only thing common between both sets of governments, whether it's the government of Deve Gowda, I.K. Gujral, or even Manmohan Singh, the idea was to keep the BJP out. And on the other hand, there was the Vajpayee government and now the Narendra Modi government. So BJP gets pole position in Indian politics. I think that is very important to understand that. Whether you support the BJP or not is completely irrelevant. You may hate the BJP, you may love the BJP. That's a personal choice. But the fact is BJP has moved to the pole position must be recognized. Number 2 was we crossed the nuclear threshold. We wanted to do so. In fact, Nehru started the nuclear program, but we felt diffident about it. The non-proliferation treaty came into existence in 1967. China had tested. So China, which you have rivalry with, we have competition, rivalry, and a lot of contention with China, whether it's Aksai Chin or the Northeast, Arunachal Pradesh, or the position of Tibet and the Dalai Lama, you have problems with China. You have problems with China because China-Pakistan nuclear and missile cooperation is very, very strong. And this dates back to the 70s. It does not start in 98. It dates back to the 70s. And once you have the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty also coming into effect in 1997, your literally window for testing was going. Now, we had done a test in 74. We called it a peaceful nuclear PNE, peaceful nuclear explosion. But we didn't want it further because of sanctions which were put on us. Now, Pakistan had weaponized. China was a threat to you. You were weaponizing, but your designs were 50 years old. Your designs had not been tested. They had been tested on computers only. Simulations are good sometimes, But simulations are good as validation, not as good as original designs. Originally, you must test them. So the need to test was very, very there. Narasimha Rao wanted to test, was prevented from testing. So India did that. Tremendous consequences we paid for it. Financial sanctions, political pariah, you're pushed in the corner. I describe how the the Clinton Albright combination was literally gunning for India. They wanted China to intervene and sort out matters between India and Pakistan. Very hostile world, but you faced it. That's the second point. The third point was that having tested and having made the point that we are testing for defensive purposes and that our main threat in any case is China, not Pakistan. Therefore, the need to now reach out to Pakistan to demonstrate that one, we are a responsible country, very responsible. We have tested, nothing further to do. Second, that we want a peaceful neighborhood and therefore we will move ahead. And despite whatever we think, we'll reach out to Pakistan. And therefore, successful meetings at Colombo, at New York, and finally the Lahore visit. Very risky, very, very risky for the part of the Prime Minister, but he took that risk. That's the third really thing. The fourth would be the reach out to America. Now, till 1991, Cold War was on. Well, though we called ourselves non-aligned, we were with the Russians. The world knew it, we knew it, Russians knew it. Whenever we were in trouble, Security Council, Russia bailed us out. So we had 30-year treaty with them also, peace in 1971 treaty. So 71, Russia goes. America is the only country, the only, let me say, the leadership of the world is there in America. How does one reach out? So we try to reach out to America, even as the sanctions were put, even as the US administration of Clinton and Madeleine Albright, and I mentioned it in detail in the book, the language they were using against India was very, very strong. Even then, we reached out. The Strobe-Talbot Jaswant Singh dialogue started. It took us some time. In September 98, barely 5 months after the test, no, 4 months in fact, Vajpayee in a speech at the Asia Society in New York, where Kissinger was present, says US and India are natural allies. The word ally is anathema to India. We have not used it before. We have not used it since, he said. He didn't mean ally like a NATO ally or a Warsaw Pact ally. Ally in the sense that our interests, our values are aligned. It is time we understood each other better, remove the misunderstanding and work with each other. Very, very important again. And the fifth point of the book is that the Kargil risk. The Kargil war was imposed on us. Pakistani army sent in their troops. Initially, they called them Mujahideen. They were not Mujahideen. They were trained members of the Northern Light Infantry. Crossed the LOC. We were caught napping. I've said so. We looked foolish. Then we fought back far more robustly than the Pakistani thought that we would, or the world thought we would. We did not expand the area of conflict beyond the Kargil sector, and we did not cross the line of control. Now, people say, well, these limitations, well, they really helped us. The limitations helped us. Suddenly, the world realized that this hyphenation of India and Pakistan is wrong. They're two different countries with two different value systems. India may have technically broken the nuclear world's rules, which we had not subscribed to. We didn't sign the NPT. Neither did Pakistan, neither did Israel. So we said, other than that, India follows the rules. We are behaving responsibly. We realized the threat of a large-scale war between two nuclear powers, and the world came down, then intervened. Now, initial reaction was ceasefire, because panic in the world. We want to ceasefire. Two nuclear weapon states and these third world countries, as they were called, are fighting. If Russia and America fought, maybe things were different. Oh, how can India and Pakistan fight a war? So stop the war. We said no. We will stop the war when everything that the Pakistani army has occupied across the LOC, they vacated. And we stood firmly by it. And then because of our action on the LOC and not expand the conflict, the world realized that we were in the right. The world did not press for ceasefire. But the Pakistani army persuaded Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif to rush to Washington, D.C., 4th of July. 4th of July, no American president works. Clinton worked hard that day. We had a number of phone calls from Delhi and Washington, and Pakistan agreed to vacate anything it had occupied across the line of control. So, it's completely different. We stood up to the world. 65, we were forced to agree to a ceasefire. 71, similarly, the day Dhaka fell, we had to have a ceasefire because even the Russians told you, thus far and no further. 99 was different. So, these 5 things I think are the key themes of the book. Of course, the way the government was brought down, very murky. Domestic politics is very murky. They're very, very murky, very depressing. But that's the reality of the kind of raucous democracy that India is. So that in brief is the book.
Thank you so much, sir. You have made my job very easy. When I imagined this session, I had a difficult choice. The choice between whether to go through all the chapters one by one or try to cover the breadth of the book. You have already covered that. So I will now have chance to ask very specific questions on the book. The first question that I have for you, sir, is on the personality of Atal Bihari Vajpayee. You have mentioned multiple times on the contradictions he faced on the political side with handling coalition within his own sets of people with Swadeshi Jagran Manch, but specifically the debate between legislative and executive that gets that you have very precisely pointed out in the last chapter on the question of reforms. While the book delves a lot in international relations and politics, the last chapter focuses a lot on the reforms that he put out. You've mentioned how he faced conflicts from his own set of ministers, which came from different political parties and ideologies, and how he used the way of bureaucracy to drive them. This is also one accusation that often falls on Narendra Modi ji when he's leading the government right now, that you get work done via the bureaucrats, while the politicians might or might not be as proactive in getting things done. You yourself have been part of the bureaucracy. What, and this was Atal Bihari Vajpayee's, he was not old in the game of leading governments compared to his predecessors. How do you think Atal Bihari Vajpayee recognized this, and what made him act that way?
No, I'll slightly disagree with your assessment in the sense that Vajpayee was essentially a political person, He, of course, recognized systems. He had worked in government for 2.5 years of his political life only. Unlike Mr. Modi, who had 12 years of experience, 13 years of experience as chief minister before he became prime minister. So Mr. Modi has far more administrative experience than Mr. Vajpayee had. So in that sense, Vajpayee therefore relied on the systems as it were, because of that is the only way he understood things. But also, he also allowed a lot of political initiatives. In fact, when we did the telecom reforms of 1999, it was a combination of efforts. You had to have political will, you had to use political channels, but you also needed a solid structure of legality to it, So it's not an either-or situation. I think it is both that is essential. Sometimes governments have this problem. They're so focused politically that they forget the administrative aspect, and then the reforms are into trouble. Or they're so bothered about the structural part of it, the bureaucratic part of it, that they forget the political will required to finally push it through, and the reforms then fail. Either in implementation they fail, or they fail because of lack of acceptance of the political system. So it's a balance that you have to do all the time. Any leader has to do it all the time. You win some, but you also lose some. And every prime minister has lost many a battle because of this very large, gargantuan Indian state that's emerged over the last 70 years. So it's not an easy job being a prime minister. In fact, it's a very, very difficult job, especially because essentially in our federal system, people don't realize it. If you want to agriculture, improve agriculture practices, for higher productivity agriculture, you want modern technology in industry. Essentially, they're driven by state governments. National governments can make some policies, but essentially, all the minor policies and all the implementation is done at the state level. And you can have the best of machines. If your nuts and bolts are defective, the machine will collapse with the best of designs. So therefore, the prime minister has very limited, what is the word Americans use for it? I think bully pulpit or something. Like you can just rally people around, but you really can't physically do too much. So it was a difficult job being prime minister, and to be fair to him, he understood his limitations, and therefore he was more open to seeking ideas from people in the system. For example, he was not comfortable with economics. He never hid the fact that he's not comfortable with economics. So he didn't pretend to be. Well, on international affairs, could give him briefs, they are called, which are double the size of it, and he would read it in a day and be comfortable with it. So it's a combination of his experience, his interest, and the imperatives of office.
So this again is a question in which my assessment might be different from yours. This is a question of the relationship between India, US, and China. You mentioned this in your brief as well. In multiple parts of the book, you have mentioned the different choices that India may have taken in that period. There was one side one argument that India, China, and Russia may together form
Yeah.
some form of coalition
Yeah.
to counterweight the weight of US on one side. On the other side, what Vajpayee did was that he had either a gut feel or a carefully understood practice in which he decided that he will call US as the natural ally and give US a choice between India and China to decide which part do they want to either weigh more on or bet their future on balancing the two. Uh, at that time, China was not naturally seen as an aggressor on India, or despite the war, China was not seen as a natural enemy of India, which is the case as we said in 2020, at least in the common man of India. What do you think made Vajpayee take that call of either going with the US or making an alliance with China and Russia?
One, of course, I didn't go too much into the book then, but I do mention it in the chapter on the nuclear, on the Pokhran test, that the China-Pakistan missile cooperation was just developing into a very high level. That the Pakistani missiles were actually the Chinese missiles, which came through the North Korean route, the Nodong 2 and the Nodong 3, etc. So that was very much there. It may have been below the surface, but the leadership knew that the main threat to India will come from China. But China was much small economically, militarily, so were we very small. So, and we had both of us not reached a stage where your stakes in the world were so high, in the sense that you were a rule maker in the world. You were still wanting to get things from the world. So China was not about to rock the system in 1998, 99. Though with the supply of nuclear technology and missile technology to Pakistan, China was creating a world where rules were not important. Now, Russia, realizing its weakened position after the breakup of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War, was losing its place in the world. Its economy was shrinking, its population was shrinking. Russia realized that Russia to be relevant would need. Realized that ultimately the Russian focus is America. So they felt that if India, China, and Russia come together, and Mr. Primakov, the then Prime Minister of Russia, made this specific proposal in New Delhi in December 98, three of us should work together, basically without saying so, to counter America. Now, working together with Russia and China, absolutely India agrees with. India then and India today agrees that India has no option but to work with Russia and with China for different reasons, both of them. You want to have good relations with China, even you want to reduce the level of misunderstandings, reduce the Chinese aggression without compromising on your national interest, right? With America, it is different. One, it was the sole superpower and it would remain the sole superpower for a long time to come. Number two, we realized, and Vajpayee realized as a player, that in terms of values and interests, US and us were on the same side. And he wanted to be on the right side of history. Too long you had been out in the cold. You were not with the democratic countries. You were not with countries who believed in rule of the law. Whatever may have been their colonial background, whatever may be their other position, the fact is legal systems are important in the world. Otherwise, small countries get crushed by big countries. And therefore, the need to work with the democratic countries in the world, led by the United States, was very important to us. Without subordinating ourselves, become a part of a dialogue with them. So that is why that tension was there. And we were clear that we have had enough misunderstanding with the USA. Why blame the Americans alone for it? We need to introspect and realize why we and the Americans have so much of apparent differences. And therefore, the need to work with America was very, very important, you know. So in a sense, but there's nothing called a on and off button in diplomacy. It's a continuum of contradictions which go on and on, you know.
This is the third question, and this is linked to the previous question in terms of contradictions, sir. Vajpayee ji, when he went to the Chintan Baitak in Nagpur, you have mentioned that you have quoted him saying that widest consultations are both desirable and necessary. Decisions of the government are final. This was in specific reference to the opposition from Dattopant Thegde ji, who had talked about both from the Labour Union of the Sangh as well as the Swadeshi Jagran Manch of the Sangh. These two unions are also opposing the recent farmer bills. The Labour Union of Sangh is opposing the law labor bills, and the Kisan Sangh part of the RSS is opposing parts of the new farm bill. And again, the government, though engaging with the stakeholders which are sitting on the border, at least the media does not report the consultations within the Sangh family on these matters. They have often accused the government of not even consulting them or not taking their views into account while drafting the final bill. How do you think these contradictions used to work then, and these contradictions used to work now, are working now?
You know, you may belong to one larger family, the Sangh Parivar. You may have larger agreements, but as institutions peopled by people with their own thinking, you would have differences of opinion. And that's a very good thing. I don't see why difference of opinion is seen as something dangerous. It's good that Swadeshi Jagran Manch or the Bharatiya Mazdoor Sangh or others have their own points of view. There are pressure groups, they will put pressure on the government. Sometimes the government, led by the BJP, agree with them. Sometimes the government BJP will not agree with them. But at the end of the day, the executive has to decide and go ahead after consultations, right? And therefore, I'm extremely comfortable with the fact that different parts of the Sangh Parivar have different views. Please also understand the Sangh Parivar is not frozen in time. If you let the old thinking there, the expression of their thoughts, it's changing with time. So, you know, this is a dynamic kind of a situation which I think we should be, in a democratic society, be very comfortable with this thing. I don't get too worried that people on your own side are opposing you. So it's, I mean, in the sense that it's not about whether you manage it's more difficult to manage the allies or to manage your own people inside, which is a question asked here also. I think you have to do both. And I quote Mr. Vajpayee saying, even when the allies were very difficult with him, I mean, the Samta party, now the JDU, wanted the Rabri government dismissed in Bihar. Mamata Banerjee wanted the left-front government in Bengal dismissed. Naveen Patnaik wanted the Congress government in Odisha dismissed. And Jayalalitha wanted the DMK government in Tamil Nadu dismissed, right? Despite that, he said these parties represent regional aspirations. We must be more sensitive to them. We must engage them more and try to find out via media wherever possible. So, of course, it was government which had a bare majority and fell in 13 months. These contradictions were very clear. That's why I call it, I am very clear, it was not a cohesive government. It had fiscalist tendencies from day one. It was like herding cats. Sometimes you got it properly, sometimes you failed and the government fell. So, you know, it's okay. It's okay. We should be used to messy politics. Messy politics is in our system. We should accept it, you know.
I suppose this messy politics was the reason in the last chapter where you have mentioned that he personally reflected on giving up politics a lot of times, often to give more time to his own personal reflections, to his own personal writings, as well as to also, you have mentioned something nice. I just read it for the audience as well. He wrote that politics destroyed the mental peace, affection, mamta, and compassion, karuna. These are very powerful lines, sir. I just loved reading them. I read them again and again just to get the thought assimilated in me. This idea of mamta and karuna in politics. How did any personal anecdotes that you have not mentioned in this book that you would like to quote, in which you felt that he reflected those values? Because I know you, in the interview with Bakhadat, you have mentioned that you have missed out on some anecdotes that did not fit the narrative.
Many. No, I wanted to actually have less anecdotes in the book. While anecdotes read nice, because anecdotes reflect a particular, sometimes a very small incident. And by putting it in a book, you're giving it an importance more than its due. And people start concentrating on the anecdote rather than the larger picture. Plus, anecdotes can degenerate into gossip very easily, you know. So I was very conscious of that. I said, let me try not to do that out. I don't know whether I succeeded or not. So I won't go too much, but the fact he was writing this in reflection. He wrote that long essay in Hindi. I read it again and again. It was a reflection on politics over a long term. And he said that if a poet becomes a dictator, he won't just carry out massacres and things like that, you know. So it's a reflection on the fact that politics often is a zero-sum game, you know, often is a zero-sum game. And which is why you lose out on karuna, you lose out on compassion and mamta. Because at that moment, you betray your own closest of friends, closest of family members. It was in that context that he was writing it. But he also wrote, much as I want to leave politics again and again, I know I can't leave politics. Politics is too strong a draw for me. It is conceding the fact, even though politics has its shortcomings, politics as practiced has shortcomings, I am a part of it. I'm not walking away from it, you know. So I think that is a very powerful sentiment he's expressing. So I'll leave him to his own words and not add mine to what he's.
This last question, I'm deriving from your first chapter, sir, in which you have mentioned a little bit about your time when he was the leader of opposition and you working along. You mentioned your inherent your contradictions within you, that whether to take this role or not, because other bureaucrats had refused in the past. Uh, a personal career at stake. Being a bureaucrat, one of the first things that a bureaucrat learns is to be as apolitical as possible. And the leader of opposition is the most political post in the system that possibly the system offers. Uh, in the book, throughout the book, you also mentioned his relationship with people in other parties. Often these relationships are built when you're not in power, because then it's a personal relationship. That's what whatever little I know about politics. The pictures that you have placed showcase this beautifully, either with Narasimha Rao ji or with other people. Even while writing, you could easily showcase the emotional connect that he had with other leaders, be it Naveen Patnaik ji, Nitish Kumar ji, Mamata Banerjee, or Jayalalitha ji. Can you dwell a little more deeper into that choice made back then? Not connecting with now, but connecting with the time when he was not in power, connecting with the time when UPA was ruling India, and any personal setbacks or any personal emotions that came around. Being with him, leader of opposition, being with him in power, and when he was not in power and the other party was in power.
And I realized that, see, all of us are political people at heart, right? We all have a points of view. It's a democratic society. We have points of view. As a bureaucrat, that point of view should not influence your working. As it does not influence your working, if anybody can say in my political career, I have taken certain decisions which have favored a political party, then I'm wrong. Fortunately, nobody has ever done that to me. So I can confidently today say, having left the bureaucracy many years ago, more than 8 years ago, I left the bureaucracy, 7 years ago, that it is that. So I remained, my feelings remained what it were, but did not affect on my work. That is very important. That is what came to me. Can I work with the leader of opposition? But I also worked with anybody. In fact, when I came to Delhi in 2012 for Mandamals, Shilpa Dikshit was chief minister. And she was very happy to take me. And she said, anybody who has worked with the prime minister, even though the different party, I know will be very good in his work. So, politicians are far less squeamish about these things that we feel. They are far broader in their acceptance. Yes, to work with Mr. Vajpayee very closely, and therefore you must be good, right? And therefore I want to. So, so we should be less worried about, as I said, but you have to be careful that your actions at no stage reflect bias. You should not be doing anything which is favoring a political party specifically. You do things which favor society. In the bargain, somebody benefits, that's collateral. But if I whole purpose of my policy is to help a particular party or a particular ideology, then you're failing the task as a bureaucrat. That was the tension. And life is full of tensions. We're skating on thin ice most of the time. Again, you make mistakes, you win some, you lose some. Was I penalized? In some senses, I can say yes, people are not happy with me, and some people. Some middle levels actually are more vicious than the people at the top, But I get angry at that? No. That means, did I object when people were good to me? I did not object when people are good to me. So how can I object when people are nasty to me? So I think you have to take it in your stride. You have to be a little more realistic about life.
People are less nasty at the middle and less nasty at the top. That understanding is something that you have given words to for me. Thank you so much for that line, sir.
A number of questions I saw, no?
Pardon?
Pallavi has a question and the question. And
yes. If you can look at the questions, sir, you can take any of these questions and just go over.
I'll do it. I'll start with Oliver's question. Yeah. At that stage, the Clinton White House was in a very unilateral mode. Then they probably realized that the world is too big for us to run it alone. So we'll have a junior partner in China, the G2. And Clinton's visit of May end 1990, it was meant to strengthen that. Fortunately, the Chinese did not feel that they wanted leadership in the world at that stage. And I didn't mention that the Russians suggested RIC, Russia, India, China. More than India, the Chinese were uncomfortable with the idea because Chinese did not want to do anything to upset the Americans, right? But the Clinton White House was definitely at that stage a very, very unilateral White House. It really thought that this was a moment of hubris to my mind, you know. Trump I'll not even address. The George W. Bush administration realized when they came to office far more realistic about the world. They already, much as they wanted to do business with China and make money with China, very significant part of the Bush administration recognized that potentially China would be a threat to the United States. So in that sense, possibly, and the first sign of change in Congress happened when people at Newt Gingrich and others said that the sanctions against India are wrong. It's China breaking the rules, not India. You know. So in that sense, fortunately for us that the Clinton administration, thanks to Pakistanis, bad policies like the Kargil war, quickly realized that their understanding of the world was different. And to be fair to them, Clinton administration was very quick in adapting to the changed world, that these are two nuclear weapons countries, but the two are very, very different. So I credit to the Clinton administration for realizing that what they were doing was wrong. But when they were doing wrong, it was terrible. Let me assure you, it was not pleasant at all. In the book, you'll see it, why I say so. It's a very, very unpleasant statements, actions by the Clinton administration at that point of time.
Thank you, sir.
And you have a question I see. I've already answered in one way Shravan's question about balancing allies or this and that. There's a question from Pallavi, which I find it difficult to really respond to. How did the emergency shape? One, I think it shaped all the opposition leaders' points of view that now we need to work with each other much better. And therefore, when the Janata Party comes to power in 1977, the largest single component of the Janata Party was the Bharatiya Janata Sangh. The largest single component was the Bharatiya Janata Sangh. All the other three were much smaller. And yet, the Janata Sangh members did not make a demand to become Prime Minister. They had precisely two cabinet ministers, Vajpayee and Advani. First time Mr. Advani got a national level position. They are the junior ministers, a couple of them. Other parties, much smaller parties, with far greater representation. So in that sense, they understood that. I mean, 98 succeeded, 99 succeeded because of the emergency experience. You know, so in that sense, it helped them become more accommodative rather than more unilateral in that. Now, foreign policy, yes, please could you shed some light on the role of ABV, Latin Foreign Policy's approach and provide the kind of latitude deference he gave. You know, he was a foreign policy person since the time not only he entered parliament, even before he entered parliament, he was interested in foreign policy. His speech in parliament in December 57 was on foreign policy. And subsequently, he was doing a lot of interest in it, studied hard, traveled the world, met people. So he had it. He and the something had developed some kind of a rapport. They did not always agree, in the sense that possibly Mr. Jaswant Singh was much more embracing of the Americans than Mr. Vajpayee ever would be. But he was also the right choice to negotiate with America, right? And therefore, it's again, Prime Minister has to keep balancing factors. And you give latitude, but at the end of the day, you set the direction. You cannot let circumstances drive you beyond the point. You try to set the trend. It's very difficult to do so, to have the sense of when to intervene and when to back off. It's not easy. But I think he managed to do that. Generally, foreign policy possibly more better than domestic policy because he was at the end of the day really a foreign policy person.
I've
answered all your questions.
Pallavi's question, that is also something that I expected to be addressed towards the end. Pallavi has asked about PM Vajpayee as a human being. He has talked about being a human, bringing the human aspect in diplomacy, in relationship with parties, in relationship with people. Throughout the book, the poet seems to be lost. And in the last chapter, the poet seems to suddenly arise. What we remember right now, and I was a child when in the Vajpayee era I was there. What I remember right now and what I remember my friends remembering about him is the poet aspect of Vajpayee. How was he as a person? How was his schedules apart from politics and policy? Did you guys sit together and read when he was reciting his poems? Did you get time to listen to it? When he used to write his poems, when he used to write, market his all the literary works, when he used to make time for all of that?
Not as Prime Minister, not very much as Prime Minister or the leader of opposition. Maybe some Sundays were generally relaxed. Sundays we didn't have official engagements unless it was very, very important. And the Saturday afternoon onwards. Saturday morning was a working hour. Saturday afternoon and Sundays, we treated it as a relaxed time, you know. So the Prime Minister needs some time to think, not poetry, but about issues, some time to reflect, some time to leave the mind technically blank so that you get good ideas, you know. But otherwise, the days of the Prime Minister can be very, very busy. I used to meet him when he came out for breakfast around 8:15. Latest 8:30, he would come out for have breakfast. I was to be there. We discussed things, not just me, Mr. Brajesh Mishra and a few others. And then he was meeting people from 9:30 till about 1:32, go for lunch, come back around 4 o'clock, and 4 to 7, 7:30 again meet people or have meetings, you know. So, and in between do files also. So I think poetry takes much longer than that. And therefore, in that period, obviously, his poetic skills must have dried up because he didn't do much writing. And I agree. But you can remember him as a poet. But please remember, politics, as they say, again, I'll quote an American saying, that you campaign in poetry, but you work in prose, you know. Once you're administering, you can't do poetry. You're doing prose. It's hardcore business, you know. How do you temper the business? How do you make it less of a obsessive thing? That is different. Each person has his own ways to do so. So a poet may have sensibilities, but when faced with an ally with a gun at your head, I think poetry quickly disappears and you try to understand what does one do about it, you know. So he wrote his poetry much before, and he didn't recite much poetry. The only time I heard him recite poetry in that period was in Lahore at the civic reception, where he recited the poetry "Jang Na Hone Denge," you know. It's good to remember him as a poet, but more important to remember him as a politician. And it's time that we, the educated people of India, took great interest in politics. You can't complain about politics if you're not prepared to put in an effort to do something about it. You know, easy to complain then, but then don't complain if things don't turn out right. You've abdicated your responsibility as a citizen. You know, so we tend to see politics as dirty and leave it to the politicians, but we are the politicians also in that sense. You know, we should be.
Jatin has a question, sir, in which he's talked about the India's need to strengthen and showcase its nuclear power, especially considering the relations with China and Pakistan. And I would link it back to the book, the chapter on the assertiveness of Vajpayee. Mostly the chapter is on the policy dimensions and within the national politics, but broadly the idea of assertiveness in military, in defense, or in terms of your own showcasing of your own power, that the might of the nation, as the international diplomacy likes to quote. How do you think the situations then and now are different in terms of India's presence and India's need to assert?
I'll reframe your question. One good thing that we do by and large is that our strategic position is a defensive position. We are out there to defend our interests, not to impose our will on the others, you know. Now, immediate neighborhood, obviously, your concerns are much greater, but otherwise, India is not in the business of nuclear assertion. We made it very clear in '98 also, as a defensive nuclear policy meant as a deterrence, purely as a deterrence. We will not be the first ones to use nuclear weapons, you know? Because nuclear weapons, once used, the point of no return kind of thing, you know. So I don't think we need to have assertion. What we do need is continuous upgradation of our deterrence capacity, with which time that capacity deteriorates, we don't invest in it. They're two different things, you know. So that sense, no, we don't need to showcase anything. Just to tell your quote unquote friends that don't meddle with us. That's all. That is more than enough, you know. So we are in the business of improving the quality of lives of our citizens, and we don't want enemies, neighbors to poke into our lands and affairs. That is important. And Shreyas is a very difficult question. Fortunately, my book ends in '99, so we didn't get too much time on Kashmir or on the economy. Actually, we were so busy firefighting every single day. I mean, skating on thin ice throughout. Every day seems to be the last day as Prime Minister. So it was not easy times, you know. People now have very romantic views of those days. It wasn't romantic at all. It was fairly tough all the time. Now, Kashmir, you realize that is a part of India. Mr. Vajpayee was firmly in favor of removal of Article 370 since the time 370 came, but he said that he lacked the numbers in Parliament and the legal means to do away with it, and therefore you have to let it be as it is, but bring about greater integration of Kashmir. grievances of the people, listen to them, try to sort them out. But again, within the larger framework of the Republic of India, there's no question of Kashmir being allowed to go to Pakistan or becoming free or something. Kashmir is very much a part of India and should remain a part of India. But they are your people. Many of them have legitimate grievances, absolutely. Some may be part of other people, the pawns or the puppets of other people, but not others are. Large majority are not. And they would distinguish between the extremists and those of whom you can engage with politically. So that is basically the Kashmir approach. I'm not going to get into Tanishq Saxena's question too much, because as I said, my book ends in 1999. You want me to compare the two, get a publisher to give me a good hefty advance, I'll write a book telling you why the two are similar and why the two are dissimilar. Of course, there'll be similarities and there'll be dissimilarities. Both come from the same Sangh Parivar. The larger worldview of both is the same, but the nuancing is very different for various reasons. Mr. Vajpayee was born in 1924. Mr. Modi in 1950 in a free India. Mr. Vajpayee saw India as a colonized country, a colony of Britain, while he was a major. When India became free, he was 23 years old. He was not a child, you know. So he has seen that period. He has seen the changes in India. He's seen India at the beginning born in the 50s and the 60s, a very weak India. He was upset that militarily we did not invest enough. Why? So we did not prevent the Chinese intruding into our territory. Not because we wanted to capture any territory, to defend our territory only. And the Jansangh throughout, 54, Jansangh had 4 members of parliament. It goes to 8 or 10 in 62. It goes to 33, its highest number in 1967. In 1971, it falls again to 2021 or something. You know, 84, the first election of the Janata Party, you have 2 members of parliament, one from Andhra Pradesh, one from Maharashtra. Right, Mr. Vajpayee himself loses. Then you recover the leadership of Mr. Vajpayee and Advani, and you come to a highest of 180. 180 you could never breach. Mr. Modi, on the other hand, has grown up differently, spent much longer as a prachara, worked at the field level for much longer, as general secretary of the party, the Prabhari for Himachal Pradesh, Chief Minister for 12-13 years, and hands-on Chief Minister on the administration. So the two come from, and of course, the educational backgrounds are different, the exposures are different. So obviously, you will not, should not expect the two to work similarly. They will have dissimilarities. And if I have 280 members of my own party and 300 next time, and my coalition has 330 members in the Lok Sabha, it's a different world altogether. When BJP in 98 gave up the 3 contentious items on the national agenda of governance, 70, Uniform Civil Code and Ram Janmabhoomi, they said we are doing so because we lack the numbers. They never said we are backing out of it. They said we lack the numbers, right? So that continuity is there, but obviously there are lots of differences. If you don't expect differences, then, but we don't have the cloning technology enough, right? They're not clones. They will be different. As I said, the experiences are different, the worldviews are different. And India has changed. India of 98, as I say, is closer to the India of 1947 than the India of 2019 is to India of 1998. You know, having seen both Indias, I can tell you this is a different India from the India of 98. And others, there will be differences also.
We are closing to the finishing of the session, sir. And as a last question, I wish to ask something very personal. I come from the state of Jharkhand, from where you have began the book in Ranchi. My village got the first road as part of the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana. You have mentioned about the idea of infrastructure and how infrastructure plays an important role as one of the key reforms that the government brought in. If I could quote 3 policies from Atal Vajpayee's government, one would be roads, second would be education, which is Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, and the third I would be confused about which one to name in terms of
Telecom.
The reforms in telecom. But
the telecom should be seen as something that will benefit the poor. Was a revolutionary idea in 1998. It did not exist. Phones were meant for the rich, right? No, sir. Phones are meant for the small farmer who can take his potatoes to a hut 10 miles away and sell it and get more money. Phones are made for the agricultural laborer so that she can move from village to another village 5 miles away and get a better wage, right?
Yes.
They in Delhi are made servants work in 5-6 houses. Would be able to handle all of them without a phone? Will a virtual vendor be able to service you, your electrician, your plumbers? I mean, telecom has a huge economic benefit, which was not seen in 98. It was felt the rich is there. If telecom industry will die, what's the big deal if India doesn't have cell phones? You know, that was the feeling in 98. Let them be damned. Let them pay money first. And they're not earning any money. How will they pay you? They shut down. If they shut down, the companies may lose. Society loses much more. So I think telecom was the first. Infrastructure came second. And in 2003, then the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan would come, you know. And the roads have made such a difference to India, economically, socially. If you have a road going to a village, and there are enough empirical studies globally, in India and in Africa, the moment you have roads, school teachers will go to the village school and doctors will go to the health clinics if there are roads there. But, and this is what Mr. Vajpayee's government was not able to do, to give drinking water in the village and allow for easier access to fuel, then the girl child will go to school. Otherwise, the girl child spends a whole day helping her mother gather firewood and bring water, draw water. You know? So these are huge social implications, other than the huge economic implications, you know? I mean, a massive boost to the economy, to employment, because of mobility becomes easier, logistic costs come down. But the social impact, the liberation of the girl child, it's so important, these roads and water supply and gas, that we underestimate it because we are used to it. We're city dwellers. We take it for granted, you know. But your village, you say, which district is your village in?
Giridih.
Giridih. Giridih. I've been to Giridih many times.
Oh,
Imagine Giridih, even the town was so difficult to go. From Hazaribagh to Giridih. Giridih was in part of Hazaribagh district.
right.
Take us 3.5, 4 hours to go there. You know, a distance of what, 100 kilometers?
100 kilometers, less than 100 kilometers now.
That's all. You know, so the idea that roads are the backbone of a national economy and society is something which was not there again. So I think we should understand it. That's why I called the book The Year That Changed India. Today we take them for granted. These were not taken for granted then. These were luxuries, quote unquote.
The part where you mentioned about sweat capital as part of the reforms, the whole idea of golden quadrilateral, the ideas of how coalition governments can be run without giving in too much, without taking in too much. I'm completely, my worldview of Vajpayee ji has expanded a lot reading your book, sir. And thank you for giving us this book. Thank you for giving me the life that we live in this country. Being a part of the same team that gave us all, I would personally thank you and the entire team that made it possible.
Thank you for inviting me, and thank you. A very good friend Sharon Lowen also there. I thought she'll ask me a question. She hasn't, but I'm glad she's listening in, and other friends also. You know, Shreyas and Pallavi and all of you. You know, thank you very much for inviting me. I've enjoyed talking to you. I hope those of you listeners who have not bought the book, you have one more chance available. Please go and buy it. It's available in your bookshop. It's available on the net. And I'd be happy to talk to you again some other day. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. And like I said, I have my book. You can't see because I have a background on.
No, I can see your book. I saw your book despite the background.
Perfect, sir. Thank you so much. And I've already started reading. I still have. Sorry, Kumar, I was as fast as you were, so I've got somewhere out of it. But thank you so much, sir, for coming on board and sharing your experience and about Prime Minister Vajpayee. I think it's very important for us to understand these history lessons, because a lot of times they say, right, it's important to understand where our history comes from, and I think these books help us understand that. So thank you again for writing this book and coming and discussing it with us, and thank you everyone who's joined, put in the questions, and we hope to see you back again next Saturday. So thank you, sir, and have a good weekend, everyone. Thank you, Kumar, definitely for doing this. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Take care.
Thank you, Kumar. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for your time. Bye, sir.
Bye, everyone.